Welcome to the Leadership Reckoning Room, the space where leaders are brave enough to look in the mirror and do the real work. I'm Steph, and today we light the lantern with someone who has reshaped how I think of leadership, learning, and what it means to stay curious in a world that rewards certainty. Shannon Minifie is the CEO of Box of Crayons, the company that has spent decades teaching leaders to be more coach-like, more human, and more awake to the moments that actually change people. Under her leadership, Box of Crayons has evolved from a beloved coaching brand into a bold, research-driven force, challenging organizations to rethink how power works, how learning sticks, and how leaders show up when the stakes are real. But titles aren't why she's here. Shannon is one of the most thought-provoking, clear-eyed, and courageously curious leaders I know. A leader who refuses easy answers. A leader who invites people to question their defaults with kindness, stretch their imagination, and choose impact over ego. A leader who has shaped my own thinking in ways she might not even realize. She's the kind of leader who makes other leaders better. So take a breath, set down whatever armor you walked in with, and step into the reckoning with us. Hi, Shannon. How are you today?
Hi, Stephanie. I'm well. Thank you so much. That's such a nice intro.
It's true. It's so true. All of it. You and I have been colleagues and partners for a really long time. And I value you. I value your leadership. I value you as an expert in your field. And you have, honestly, you've made me better. What you offer has made me a better leader and challenged a lot of the ways that I had approached just leadership and coaching in general, and how to really be curious and hold a moment and tackle things like your advice monster, because I'm one of those people who tends to want to fix things instead of sitting back and guiding others to find the answers on their own. And so you and Box of Crayons and the coaching habit has helped me tremendously. So I'm so thankful you're here today, because I think everybody that's listening is going to learn so much from you.
Well, thank you. I mean, I've grown up career-wise here at Box of Crayons, so I've learned a lot from you as well on what it means to sell to large enterprise and support large enterprise, and just learning a lot about what the challenges are in delivering learning. So thank you.
Yeah. Shannon and I partnered and brought the coaching habit to all managers at Microsoft. So all 30,000 plus managers at that time. And it was one of the top learning experiences that our managers said was the most helpful. And we also experienced it a bit at ServiceNow. And I just think it's such a natural way for people in general to learn how to be more coach-like and curious, especially in today's environment and atmosphere of chaos.
Yeah.
So, but we'll get to that.
Sure.
So first, just tell us a little bit about yourself and like, what's your career story and what is the most you thing about you?
Yeah. I should have a better shaped story, more compact answer to this by now. My story, I guess, is that I didn't and couldn't have written this story, which I think most people say about their careers now. But I wanted to be a literature professor. So I studied and then worked in academia for a couple decades. I got a PhD in American literature, actually. And when I was finishing up my dissertation, I met the founder of Box of Crayons, Michael Van Stanier. And he offered me a part-time job to kind of augment my lectureships that I had on the go at the moment. And so I very much needed that job. And it was the beginning of the story for me, really, in shifting from higher ed to corporate learning and development. And since then, I've made the full shift from literary criticism and teaching literature to leading an organization that helps companies really, like you said, build this human capability to keep pace with constant change and kind of hold up the best of themselves under pressure when times are tough.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love your background. Sadly, I don't know if I knew that. I probably did, but maybe
I forgot. It down. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because you bring a very different kind of specific expertise that corporate learning needs when it, with your background. And thinking of it from a different perspective of, just only the silo of corporate, it broadened your scope of how learning impacts just human beings in general.
Yep.
Inside or outside of the corporate setting. So I think that that's really valuable. So what drew you? I mean, you said a little bit about Michael, who's amazing, and his books are great too. I have to push, his books. So go on Amazon and look him up.
Yeah.
But what drew you to Box of Crayons before you ever imagined leading it? I know you mentioned a little bit, but you've moved up the ranks pretty.
I have. I've moved up the ranks. That's right.
Yeah.
So I started 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago, in a publicity role, and I was pitching the Coaching Habit book. So our founder, Michael, had just written a book called The Coaching Habit. It's sort of the backbone of our IP and the concepts that we build around. And so I got hired in this very part-time publicity role, pitching the book to like journalists and podcasters and radio hosts. And so what drew me to it is like, I read the book in one sitting. It was a very different kind of, like I hadn't read any business books, honestly, to that point in my life. I read it in one sitting. And I just thought there were so many interesting hooks in it that would be interesting to writers. Yeah. I think probably I brought a naivete and a lack of context that might've actually been helpful in that moment. And I thought there were so many interesting hooks that would be interesting to writers and people to review the book. And so that's kind of where I started out. And then as my role changed, I found myself talking to people in L&D and all these different companies every day. And it was just a very different vibe than academia, which was kind of competitive and sort of, not to say that like big corporate can't be competitive, but the people that we work with are like humanists, and they're interested in learning, and they're interested in understanding what motivates people and brings out the best in them. And I have a lot of great colleagues from like my time in graduate school and teaching, but it's a different sort of like competitive and can be a cold environment. And frankly, after a decade alone writing in a library by myself, I was just happy to have days that were like punctuated by like sales calls and internal meetings and like doing some strategy work with the founder and all of that. So yeah, I never imagined leading it when I came in, far, far, far from it. But I pretty quickly liked just the difference in the way my days went. It was an unexpected turn, like I said before.
No, I love the fact that you said you brought this naivete to it. That resonates with me because I always say I bring the street smarts to what I'm doing, not necessarily the book smarts or the PhD background. And, I've said before, I have a Bachelor of Science in Psychology, but the reality is starting in engineering and being young at Microsoft and growing through the experiences has built up the expertise that I could take and did take when I finally moved from engineering to HR, because I didn't know anything about HR. I literally thought HR was my HR my frontline person that I went to for benefit. I thought that's all HR was. I had no clue.
Yep.
And then I was like, oh my God, it's all of these things. But I think because of that, I was more curious.
Yep.
I was asking questions that hadn't been asked before.
Yep.
Or things that were just kind of taken for granted or assumed that I literally didn't know about. And so I think when you come in with that kind of curiosity and no ego and just excited to learn everything you can about something new, I think that makes the environment better. I think that makes your team better. I think that makes the products you're trying to sell better, like all of those things.
Yeah, I did. I had to be a real sponge like that in those days for sure. I think it has helped me. Like we're a small business, and every time we have new team members, it's really easy for me to go back to like, what were my gaps when I was new to this industry?
Yeah.
What did I need right away? So I think having lived that makes it easier for me to understand what some of those needs are.
Yeah, I think that's amazing because it's relatable, and it makes the new people who are coming in feel like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed, but this is kind of how everybody started, and so I'm not alone.
Yeah, I get how steep the learning curve can be.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on in the world right now.
Yeah.
I guess from the core of what Box of Crayons has been, what is the answer that Box of Crayons is now trying to tackle and answer in the world right now?
Yeah. I think like the question that we're wrestling with, as I think a lot of organizations are, is like, how do we support organizations through immense and what feels like unending transformation, right? So transformation has these trends and like there's digital transformation and like there's all these things, right? But like I read something the other day about, I think it was like a Forbes article or something, that fully 95% of all large enterprises are going to be going through a total transformation, not major innovation, but like digging up brand like roots and moving them kind of thing, transformation in 2026. So how do we like unlock really the organizational agility that's required to bring about successful change, right? And if anybody had the easy answer to that, that'd be great, because I think everyone's been asking that for a while. But I think so uniquely for Box of Crayons, I think what's underneath that question, the real burning question for us is, how do you create human agency at a moment when really like the instrumentalization of people feels like it's at its peak, right? Like it's a hard truth, but it's a truth of capitalism, that capitalism favors outcomes over process.
Oh, yeah.
But that hurts when you think that a process has created value, or when you think there's value in the process for you, right? Like this idea of like, you've achieved mastery through that process. It gives you meaning, gives you purpose. And it does feel like we're at a real moment where outcomes are really what the focus is over that process. And that feels like an instrumentalization of the human aspect of work. And so like we know command and control, it's like never been so obsolete an approach, when what your leaders need is a way to bring people along with them, with like the specter of what work is and might be for them kind of like hangs over them in a really uncertain way, right? And so, how do you create agency? And because the pressures that show up in that disruption is that complexity rises, leaders rush to answers, they rush to advice, they rush to direction, and they think it's efficient, but it narrows thinking and it reduces agency. So how do we help create more agency, more choice, more choice of action when this change feels like it's happening to people and it almost feels inevitable?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's I hear that everywhere.
Yeah.
I hear that everywhere. And back to, kind of just the curiosity part of it.
Yeah.
I know with, just the world we're living in, and it's moving so rapidly with AI and how things are changing. And like you were talking about, like huge transformations. Curiosity is at the fundamental of all of that, because you have to ask the questions still from the human, just the basic human understanding about being curious, and not just assuming AI is going to have all the answers. And there is always going to be a human element that is needed. I will always believe that, not just in leadership, but just in how you work and partner with AI, versus feeling the fear that you are going to be replaced by AI. And there are going to be some roles that are. That's how transformation works in a rapidly changing, especially industry from technology's perspective. But the reality of what we are talking about from a learning and a growth and a coaching and a human-centered perspective, you have to keep that human piece. And so, again, that's like the fundamental of what I believe in, and why I started Luminary Leadership Consulting and all of the things that I'm doing, is because I truly believe now is the time to double down on human-centered leadership. It's not a nice to have. It's really the critical foundation for strong leadership, and really seeing other people as human beings and caring about them as human beings, and being able to lift them to do whatever they want to do by being able to create environments where they can do their best and be their best as human beings. And so, trust and care, it unlocks curiosity, creativity, and just the possibility of people and the potential in people and in your work. So what have you seen that reinforces the power of leading with curiosity and care versus command and control? I mean, I know you touched on a little bit, but like, I just want to double down on that a little bit for everybody listening.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to reinforce the link that you're making here, right? Like if the question is, how do we create human agency and introduce more humanity in the age of the machine? Then our answer, absolutely, as you've suggested, Stephanie, is that like people leaders are the lever. And organizational agility really starts with that leader and with specifically this ability to show up in these moments that matter and create clarity and empower ownership and inspire innovation, all the things that you just said, and to do that by using curiosity. So we've seen for sure, as opposed to command and control, clearer problem definition, right? So just teams, and this is like very practical, but like this is what we hear, right? So teams spending less time solving the wrong problem and more time focusing effort where it actually matters. So in a high growth, high change environment, the desire to move quickly means you default again back into giving advice and rushing to answer instead of creating that space to stay curious longer. So we've seen time saved. We've seen people like a stronger ownership and judgment, right? So it's about like, how do you push responsibility to the level of the problem? Allow decisions to be made closer to where the work gets done with clear accountability. That ownership can turn into that sense of agency, right? So we've had clients report like a stronger sense of empowerment, time savings again with using what we call a coach-like approach. So that's to really just slow down the rush to action and advice given and stay curious longer. And then better conversations earlier. So leaders spending less time giving advice and more time asking questions means you can help drive performance. You uncover where people are stuck. You uncover where they don't have clarity, where they have fear. And then we've seen that leads to keeping your best people as well, right? So this is like this Dan Pink idea of like hire good people and leave them alone. That's like kind of an oversimplification, but leading with curiosity to give people space to try to grow things and develop their own sense of mastery and purpose. Like our best clients know that that's a surefire way to keep the most talented people and help them grow and thrive.
It's the absolute truth. I've lived it. I've learned it. I've experienced it myself personally, is when you can, first and foremost, create clarity around expectations of role, definition of role, what the clarity is of your North Star, of what you're working towards. Even when that rapidly changes, right? You're right there with each person that you are lucky enough to lead or to be in your sphere, that you create that clarity for them, that even if you don't know the answer, you can help by continuing to represent the why and explain the why. Even if you don't have the what all figured out, people just need something to ground themselves in, to know that what they are doing every day matters, that they are valued and that they are empowered to go figure it out. And I experienced that. I've been in command and control environments. I have been in environments that are based in toxicity and fear, where I felt like I couldn't not just be my authentic self, but do the job that you hired me for very specifically, because I was so afraid of making mistakes. And that if I came and didn't have all of the answers to all of the questions prepared, buttoned up, that I was going to be reprimanded, my brand would be tarnished, like all of those things. And you cannot be creative or, like any sort of...
can't, work its best in that kind of fear. Yeah, like your lizard brain is freaking.
Right, like you're stuck, you're boxed in. And then I've moved from that to environments where it's like, you're empowered. We hired you for this reason. Go do it. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I can do anything. It feels like you can be as creative as you want. You think outside of the box. The results are so much better when you don't work in environments of fear and where your leadership comes with curiosity and empowerment and making you feel valued and providing clarity if and when you need it and as often as you need it. And right now, this is all I hear. It's all I read about is, you think AI is supposed to be providing more clarity and making things easier. And the reality is, I'm sure you're experiencing it with a lot of the companies you work with. It's chaos right now.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I'm hearing again, and this brings it like underscores what you're saying about that lived reality of the day to day of trying, like, what's the difference between someone who's empowered to do their work and who's not, and who kind of shuts down. And then the sort of big problem of we all need to transform in the face of AI. What
Yeah.
we're hearing again and again is that, so like leaders are experiencing that pressure from both sides. So they have this pressure to like drive strategic alignment from the top, and then they've also got pressure from their team, which is like, hi, I want to like try things and like, let me do the job you hired me to do. And so they've got, and they need to empower those people so that they can innovate and get the best results. But they're holding on tight because they're worried. So there's that pressure from both sides.
Yeah.
And I think the ability to be curious and so to ask questions that take some of that pressure off yourself, that allow people to have some more ownership. It's really at that intersection of that pressure. And a way to help alleviate that.
Yeah. 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 I think that's amazing. And that's what companies need, is what you're offering. Okay. So I want to ask a couple of questions just about your leadership, just in general.
Yeah.
So what's a moment from your early life that quietly shaped the leader that you became? Maybe just a couple of examples of things that have stuck with you.
Yeah. I'm light on insightful, epiphanic moments from my life that have shaped the leader I became. I'm also light on like leadership gurus and books that shaped my thinking. But
Yeah.
I have to think about like, what is it about my early life that shaped the leader I became, or that made me think about what are the qualities of leadership as I define it. Like I've always been an avid reader. And I actually think that it's been reading, which is really just people working out thinking and working through ideas, sometimes difficult and controversial ideas. And so having relationship with those writers through reading, that's shaped my sense of great leadership, which I think has something to do with having the courage of kind of like of conviction and like the unpopular thing to risk being disliked. If you can stand on something that you think is true, then you can always go back to that as like a place of solidity. I think it's writers of all different kind of like stripes that first showed me what that kind of integrity looks like. But I think that kind of integrity is something that you want in leaders. And that if you think about kind of like employee surveys and like the importance of questions like, do you trust senior leadership? It comes down to a connection between what people say and what they do.
Right.
And I think there's a way in which writers are so naked out there, saying things, whether it's fiction, where they're just calling out how weird we are and admitting things that are real about themselves that no one else would, right? Or like if it's nonfiction. And so I think like kind of like experiencing writers who had that ability, that courage to do that started to shape my definition of leadership first, which is kind of weird. I know it's not like
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's interesting because that's not something I ever thought about that shaped me.
Yeah.
But it has, now that you're saying that, because I have been an avid reader since I was little. The love of just books and adventure was always an escape for me. And it was always a way, just for me to learn from the different characters, like you said, and to escape whatever stress I was feeling at the moment and reground myself, and then give you kind of like hope of what could be or what might be. From an early age, you're exactly right. That's where you learn, is from the written word. And I still like, I have to have a physical book. I love Kindles and all of that, but I need to have a physical book where I can smell it and I can feel it. And I have books, if I could pan out, stacked all around me. All around me.
So it's an unusual answer maybe, but I think I've had like immense respect and awe for people who don't accept secondhand opinions. Like they do the reading, they find the original sources, they form their own opinion, and sometimes like go through the important liberal exercise of arguing for the other side. So I love essays in particular. And I think it's like reading essay writers that made me, the first times I've thought, wow, this person's really like leading thinking, like they are a leader. Yeah.
Okay. So from the corporate side of things, or even in academia,
Yeah.
is there a leader, professor, or otherwise who shaped you in ways that you didn't fully understand until later, just from either watching them or the impact that they had on you personally and professionally?
Yeah. I think actually a story that comes to mind a lot when I think about like what this is more like what does good leadership look like, but maybe that is what stuck with me. And so it's apropos here. um our founder, Michael Bungay Stanier, so he's really attentive to power
Yeah.
and status and how power and status plays
Yeah.
out. And I think that this what something he did one day was like instructive, and it's something that I should endeavor to copy however I can. So this is a story. So he and I were in San Francisco to meet with a really big client. I don't know, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, maybe.
Mhm.
So I'm still like, what's HR? And maybe 8 years ago, even. And I am postpartum. I don't know,
Oh,
year postpartum. Anyway, you know how, all the things that can entail.
yep.
And
Yes.
we are commuting to this high rise. I'm already like, I have to go to the bathroom. You know what high rises are like to get into. There's a lobby. The client's keeping us waiting. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
there's no bathrooms on the main floor. And then finally we come down, we get escorted up. And like all that's on my mind by that time is like, I have to pee anywhere that I'm able to go pee. And Michael knew that I had to go really badly, but he also knew that I didn't want to be like, hi, nice to meet you. Where's the toilet? Right. And so
Yeah.
he pretended he had to go to the bathroom really badly as soon as we met them because he knew that his status could afford
Yes.
that. Like, and so
Oh my
he
gosh.
pretended he had to go. He didn't even say he was going to do that, but as soon as we shook hands with our client, he was like, you know what, I really got to go to the bathroom. Can you show us where that is? And then we went, and then like he just kind of hung out in the hallway, didn't even have to go, right? So obviously he has shaped me in ways that I still think about, and that I probably emulate and all of that. But anyway, I just think that's such a great story about like being really attuned
Yeah.
to what status can allow you. And not that I couldn't have asked to go to the bathroom, but
Right.
yeah. Anyway, so I try to be aware of that as much as I can. If there's anybody in the room that feels like their status in some way prevents them from being so as human as having to go to the bathroom, how do I like say that, name that
Yeah.
thing out loud? Mm-hmm.
That I love that story for a lot of reasons. One, even if you hadn't have if you had said that to me without saying the fact that he knew what his status, he knew the play there.
Yep.
I would have just, well, and this is what I think about Michael anyway, I would have just seen that as what an incredible, insightful leader to see that without the spoken word, to understand that you needed that without the spoken word, and that he, as a leader, like was there for you. He had your back.
Yeah.
He supported like that. I think that's a great story. And that really kind of sums up what leaders should be doing for each person that is, again, I always say that you're privileged enough to be able to lead, and knowing that without them having to necessarily even tell you, you can see it through the verbal, through the nonverbal, through all the cues. And they know you have their back in whatever situation, going to the bathroom, being in a room where they feel fear, presenting for the first time, to leadership, all of those things, but they know you're right there with them and that you've got them. I think that's so great.
Yeah, it is I think one of the small ways I try to emulate that now is like if we're meeting with a client and, people love throwing around acronyms and they're hard to keep up with. And sometimes they're, ones that everyone could know. And sometimes they're ones that only you can know at a certain company. And I'll try to gloss those things in real time, right? Like, oh, you mean, do you mean this? Or right.
Yeah.
Ask the stupid question, hoping that and thinking that like my status in our meetings now can afford that like I can ask the silly question that maybe somebody else doesn't want to. And it's not a silly question. Acronyms are really, they prevent understanding, and we should all try not to use them.
Right.
But yeah, anyway, I think it's really instructive. He went the extra mile with the bathroom, but
yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I see that in you as a leader. I've seen you with your team. I've seen how you partner. I've seen internally, externally, like across. And I'm talking to the CEO of Box of Crayons right now. That should freak me out in my status, right? But here's the reason that it doesn't. This is an amazing conversation that I get to have with somebody who I have seen lead in the way that she talks about. You are like the epitome of a partner. You have your team's back. You would do exactly that. And I think it's just in you, but I think Michael probably also brought that out in you to show that that's okay now in the corporate setting to be able to be like that.
Yeah.
And I love it. Like, you're the kind of leader that I point to when I say, here's a CEO who leads without ego, who is right there in it with her team. And your company and your teams are better because of that. And that you don't create environments of fear and you see people. And I think I just am so appreciative of you for all those reasons.
Well, I wish I could do it perfectly all the time. We can't. That's why we exist. Actually, it's because it's not possible. You got to self-manage. No, yeah.
Well, and that's what makes it even better is that, again, you just proved another example is that's why you're a great leader, is because you don't have all the answers. You're not going to be perfect all the time. And you create an environment for others to feel that that's okay for them as well. So I love that. Okay. So if we can talk about being coach-like and curious, especially when leading in the era of AI, I really want to make sure we spend some time on this. I know we've touched on it a little bit, but is there a story that's meaningful to you that shows the power of coaching? Maybe we just start there. And then you can pull in, like, my second question is just, when you think about leading in the era of AI, why does being coach-like matter more, not less than ever? Being coach-like and curious.
Yeah. So when I think about leading in the era of AI, why does being coach-like matter more? I'll start there and then come back to one question at a time. I mean, we talked about this a little bit before, but I think, for me, it's in an AI accelerated era, creating that human agency becomes critical. We just talked about power and status, right? People are feeling powerless. They're feeling like they have no control. Yeah. So how do we create human agency? And I think a lot of organizational change has a real sense of like, it can be exciting at the top or it can be exciting at the beginning, but then there's a real sense of inevitability and lack of power as things kind of drag on, right? So like some people at the top are agents of change. The rest of us are just kind of recipients of that change. So this makes change something that's happening to people rather than something that they are themselves driving, right? And the changes that are like wrought by AI, because that's the change we're talking about right now, right? We're talking about change, but it's all precipitated by AI. They're no different, right? And in some ways, like we said, they're more pointedly disempowering, right? So at the same time, the leaders are trying to gain efficiencies, keep up with margin compression and competition in the market. It's like, so what's my role in that as the human doing this work, right? So in that environment, the ability to be coach-like, so to ask better questions, to enable ownership, to unlock thinking and engagement across the team, I think becomes really important, because that's where the friction shows up and where the stalling out happens, where people are like, you know what, this is their change, not mine. When is this going to stop? I'm out. And so how do you actually, how do you unlock not just like the intelligence of AI, but the intelligence of the whole system of all of your people? And that includes getting them, they have to be excited. So they have to be asked, they have to be invited into that work, I think, through questions. I don't know if I answered both of those questions.
No, you did. No, that was great. And I feel like that's exactly it. If you can create an environment where people aren't feeling like this change is happening to me, but instead I get to be a part of the change and define it along the way.
Yeah.
That's going to go so much further. I've talked to many, many people who are kind of quietly quitting, if I can still use that term, but it's the truth, because they don't know, they're not brought along. A lot of times people feel like if I'm asking questions, then I might be seen as somebody who's not on board. So I'm just going to stay quiet and I'm just going to show up. I'm going to do my job. I'm not going to go above and beyond, because it's kind of this is happening to me and I don't have any power. I'm not empowered to help facilitate the change. So if you can shift that, especially like I said it a little earlier, especially if you don't always, even as a leader, if you don't always know the what, or the what changes so much or so quickly, because it does every day, creating ambiguity that's insane.
Yeah.
But you can offer the why.
Yeah.
That's enough, I think, for people to feel like, okay, got it.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Yeah. And you said something interesting. You touched on like research that was done by like a number of different like researchers and writers, but was brought together in like an HBR article dedicated to the ROI of curiosity, or the business curiosity. And that is that even in some organizations will state a commitment to curiosity, and senior leaders in particular will say, oh, I get to be curious at work. I'm curious all day long at work. But then actually there's two like sources of dissonance with that. One is that people who aren't in senior leadership positions are like, actually, no one's curious around here. It's not really a curious environment. And also the same leaders that say that they value curiosity see question asking as a source of like a challenge, like and so I think one of the interesting things there is like, how do you change how do you encourage people to ask questions, and how do you change the kinds of questions you're asking, right? So if someone on your team is saying, why are we doing this? I can see how that can feel unhelpful. Like it can feel like, okay. But if people are saying, what's the real challenge that we're trying to solve here? Or like, what's most important to our customers? Like those are super interesting questions that aren't like, do you know what I mean? Like those are questions worth really, it's not worth answering. Why are we doing this? You need to give people the why you're doing it, but you want, you need to encourage curiosity. You need to encourage leaders to see curiosity not as evidence of challenging the change, but of really trying to understand best the change so that they can contribute to how it's affected, right?
Yeah.
What they are going to do to help be successful. Yeah.
Everybody wants to have value in their work. Especially the new generation of workers.
Yeah.
They need to know that what they are doing has meaning all the way to the top.
Yeah.
And if not, they're going to go find it somewhere else. So, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a couple of just questions around, and, we probably touched on some of this, but just the reality is that, AI brings and AI tools that kind of feel like they're bringing certainty to people, at least from when you question, like you ask questions of Copilot or Claude or ChatGPT, and what you're getting back feels like certain, like their answers are certain all the time. And so and Box of Crayons has always championed curiosity over certainty. Yeah. And how does that evolve when leaders suddenly have these tools that sound certain all the time, but they're not always.
No. And like humans aren't either, to be clear.
No. Yeah.
So I think, right. So I think this is a tricky one. So I think curiosity, so you're right. Curiosity is about asking great questions. And it's about, privileging questions, better questions over quicker, perfect answers. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's also about, for me, curiosity is defined as like, the enthusiastic pursuit of an interest, like just someone being so enthusiastically into something. I've read that curiosity is more properly directed at solving mysteries. So this matters to your question, Steph, because like these mysteries are things that don't have easy or maybe even certain or finite answers, maybe ever, right? So people are a good example of that. People are like, we're irrational. We're maybe the biggest mysteries of, you're married, right? Like, who is that person? Right? Like that, what was that series about the undercover Russians, the Americans? Series, that was about how you don't know who your spouse is. Come on. That is what that whole series was about. It wasn't about espionage. It was about how you might as well be married to somebody who's a total anarchist, because who are other people, right? So in some ways, I think you're right. Like Box of Crayons has leaned into this construct of like curiosity versus certainty. And sometimes I'm wondering maybe if like that is not the point, and maybe it's like curiosity over assumptions. Like better to ask great questions than to assume something is right.
Right.
And I guess where AI does come in, of course, is that like we have this very fast and frictionless answer to things that like even a month ago or years ago would have been like taken research or years to produce, right? And so that
Yeah.
speed gets collapsed into a certainty, and then we assume it's right. So how do we use
Yeah.
curiosity as a counter, maybe not just to certainty, because there'll be things where certainty isn't ever going to come into play, but how does curiosity continue to balance assumptions that we might make? So are we still asking the right questions? Are we still just testing our assumptions even as we're looking at what the AI has given us? And
Yeah.
also, can I just apply this to people? Because people are the real mysteries. That's why we're focused on flying curiosity.
100%.
Mhm.
I was just talking with an amazing colleague, Rick Mirabald, just before I started talking to you today.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this same topic, and just the fact that I think a lot of people believe that when you're asking AI tools questions, that you are getting the best answer,
Mhm.
the top answer as the result. And the reality is, what it's doing, it's going out there and it's looking at all of the things and giving you a compiled, like, I want to say it's almost the median answer. And Rick and I were talking about this. It's not necessarily the best and it's not the worst. It's the median.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you got to be aware of that when you're using whatever it's giving you, however you're using it.
Totally. Especially the more expertise you have too, right? Like I went to this talk by a guy who's building an AI that's specifically for CMOs. It's a tool
Yeah.
to support chief marketing officers. And his whole thing was like a well-designed augmentation, AI augmentation is about capturing, like at the level of the prompt, but it's at, at the level of the training of the thing too, not just what you might think, but how you think.
Yeah.
And the expertise
Yeah.
comes from the ability to detect patterns quickly. And like AI is fantastic at detecting patterns quickly, right? Like we've read the stuff about how it can like, diagnose skin cancers faster on less information, just looking at patterns. But
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
detecting patterns and what falls out of those patterns too is like where some of that discernment comes in. And so not to say that AI isn't going to be able to achieve that or can't achieve that now in some specific domains, but like generic AI applied to a domain specificity is probably less useful than one that's really, really carefully trained to reflect not how you think.
Yeah. Okay. So I can't believe that we're already coming close to time.
Okay.
Shannon and I could talk to you for hours and hours. And I'm sure our readers would love a 3-hour version of a podcast to listen to. I know they would. But the reality is we try and keep it under an hour for a lot of reasons. And for your own sanity and talking to me, I'm not going to keep you here captured. So as we close, just again about the leadership reckoning room. This is really a place for leaders to look at themselves and to really learn and grow and hold the mirror up to themselves. Because I believe self-awareness is really the first thing I think we as leaders need to make sure that we have and that we pay attention to before we lead other people. You have to understand your biases. And am I leading this room with ego right now? Like, be aware of how you are showing up. And so what's one question you think every leader should ask themselves before they walk into a room?
Yeah. I think the question they should ask themselves before they walk into a room, and I probably should do this more often, it's actually one of our coaching questions. We call it, it's the foundation question. What do you want?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what do I want to come out of this? That might be what you want might be how someone feels. It might be, action you want them to take. And then a fast follow to that is, what needs to be true? Like, what do I need? How do I need to show up then in alignment with what I want? So yeah, I think what do I want is a question to ask as they walk into a room.
Exactly. Because then when you walk out of the room, you might have more of a sense of what they're going to say, because they're going to talk about you when you leave the room.
Yeah.
And what is that wake or that ripple that you're leaving in the room?
Yeah.
And if you come with an approach like that, it's a more humane approach that invites the room to be in a trusted environment, feel like they're in a trusted environment.
Yeah.
Is there
being intentional too? Are you intentional as you go into, meet?
Right.
It could be high stakes or whatever conversation.
Right. It's funny how some don't even consider that, but like really setting yourself like, okay, I'm going to walk into this room. This is how I'm going to show up. This is what I really want from this room. How do I get there? So a lot of leaders aren't that self-aware enough to know. They're just coming from one meeting to the next. And that's the way they storm in and sit down sets the tone for everybody in that room.
Yeah.
Am I going to be in a place where I feel like I can share my voice, or do I need to stay quiet? So I love that. Is there a practice that you return to when you want to make sure that you are leading with humanity? Is there something that you do, a ritual, or just a reminder to yourself, or did you just answer that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty humane, I think. I mean,
Yes, you are.
I read poems at town halls at Box of Crayons.
We need more of this. That's
more than once I've read a poem. Not a poem I wrote. I don't write poetry. But I think my default to leading with more humanity is showing more of my own.
Yeah.
Because that gives permission. So that's my own imperfections. It's maybe some of what I've got going on outside of work. I have 2 young kids. Husband just went back to work after going to back to school, which is a big thing.
Wow.
Sharing where I get stuck, trying to be relatable and showing people like where I'm struggling and where I'm worried. Trying to insulate them from too much worry, but showing some of that. Yeah. Yeah. So I think, and that comes back maybe to like that influence of Michael, which is like trying to take my status down a notch in doing those things. I also swear a lot.
I do too. Everybody listening on this podcast, it's going to happen and I'm not going to edit it out.
I've been very good. But I think it adds a bit of an edge, but it's a little bit more of my humanity. It's slightly different.
It's who we are.
Yeah.
Right. So I make no apologies for it. I love that very, very much. Okay. So the last question, and I'll share with you, I'm so excited. I created a game called the Leadership Reckoning card game.
Okay.
It's where you ask yourself, am I the problem? Self-awareness hurts, play anyway. So it's at manufacturing now. I'm so excited. I'm going to do the prototype, I think at the end of this week.
Very excited.
But the idea is that with this podcast, at the last question is always going to be a card that I've pulled from the game and a question from that game that I ask anybody I'm talking to. And so this question for you today is, what's a leadership habit that you inherited and wished you hadn't?
I don't know.
Are there any? Maybe there aren't any because you're amazing.
No, I'm sure I have. I mean, I'm actually thinking, are habits inherited? But or am I? Yeah, I'm like, do I? Because the inherited makes me think about my parents, like genetically, and then I'm like, oh, but which habits have I emulated for sure? And it's probably both from my parents and actually from leaders I've worked with. I think it's my work ethic generally. And this isn't like, an interview question where it's like, what's the worst thing about you? And you're like, I just work so hard. This is a problem. This is a leadership habit. It's a problem because the good side is that like, I'm always asking like, am I at enough? I have like a core value of adding in more value than I take out of things. Yeah. And so that looks like, where can I contribute? Where can I contribute? Am I adding value this week? Did I add value this week, this day? And I think, and like for leaders who lead me, that's like a sense of duty and responsibility and obligation that everyone's like delighted about. But the downside of that as a leader is that everyone is watching what I do, and it can start to look like that's what commitment looks like. And it can look like hero, kind of like martyr type behavior. That kind of always on, always at it, right? So I think that is that kind of ethic, which I do think has been both like emulated and inherited for me, is valuable to organizations, and it's a liability when everyone's watching you do it and thinking that that's the standard. Yeah.
Wow, that's really good. That was my last question. So I'm just so thankful, Shannon, that you are here for bringing your clarity and your courage and your relentless curiosity into this room. And you reminded us all that in a moment when AI can answer almost anything, leaders are defined by not what they know, but by the questions that they're willing to ask and the curiosity that they show every single day. And you reminded us that being coach-like isn't a technique. It's a posture of humanity and a way of holding power lightly, and a commitment to seeing people as capable and creative and as whole. And you reminded us that the human-centered leadership isn't an optional thing in this era. It's the only kind that scales trust, the only kind that unlocks imagination, and the only kind that keeps us from outsourcing our humanity to the tools that we build. So as you leave this conversation, everybody, thank you for joining us. Take a moment, notice what made you stop and think today, what stretched your perspective, and what opened a new possibility for you. Ask yourself, what might become possible if I led with more curiosity than certainty? And remember that self-reckoning isn't about getting it perfect. It's about staying awake to who you're becoming. So until next time, keep the lantern lit and keep doing the real work to light the lantern for those around you. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Thank you. That was so fun. Thanks.